Welcome to Ability Assistance and happy St. Patrick's Day weekend. My name is Phyllis Jones, Chair of the North Andover Commission on Ability Assistance.
My name is Stacy Leibowitz, Secretary of the North Andover Commission on Ability Assistance.
This month we are pleased to welcome Joesph LeBlanc, North Andover and Boxford's District Director of Veteran Services. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you for having me.
So this has been a long time I've been trying to get you on this show. Let's start a little bit with what's your background with the military?
Sure. So every veteran service officer by state law has to be a veteran. I served in the U.S. Army from 2003 to 2018. Most of that was reserve time. I was deployed to Iraq in 2006 with the Corps of Engineers. I went with the unit out of Fort Benning, Georgia. Served in Ramadi, Fallujah, Baghdad, that area, building combat outposts and forward operating bases for the Marines, the Army. Worked with the Seabees a lot. Came home, worked, at that point I started using my GI Bill, went back to school. In 2011, I deployed again with the 368 engineers out of Londonderry. That was an engineer battalion, so different mission. I worked as an operations NCO in what they call the S3. S3 is the operations side of a battalion. So basically QA, QC and convoys, construction operations, stuff like that. Overseeing a lot of the travel that soldiers had to do within the battle space. So that was what I did in the Army. I came home, used my GI Bill to go back to school. Went to NECO, transferred into Salem State. I did the social work program there and a history minor. Loved it and ended up doing the master's program there in social work. Personally, I had a great VSO where I lived at that time. I lived in Amesbury. Had a great veteran service officer there who was a Navy veteran and a social worker. So I had, at that time, she was asking us to do a lot of stuff in the community, a lot of veterans, so a lot of civic engagement. And I remember asking her, I said, what do you do? And she said, well, I'm a social worker. And I'm like, social worker? And I had never thought of pursuing a career in social work. And after looking into it, I was like, this is a great choice to work with people, which I'd all done my whole life. So I went back to school, used my GI Bill, and now I'm licensed. So that's
Well, congratulations.
Yes.
thank you.
That's
So
a
that's
great achievement.
yeah. So it's basically my Army career, and then transitioning into
But you're
civilian life.
still directly connected to the military because you've done that. You've made that transition. How long did you serve? in
I
total?
served 29 months active duty in the Middle East, several countries. I mean, Iraq and Afghanistan mostly.
But your entire length of service, how long?
15 years.
15 years. And now, when we talked, you're not officially retired from the military.
No. So on the reserve side, you have contracts. If you do 20 years, you can receive a 20-year letter from the reserve or the guard, which then you can retire, essentially. But no, so I enlisted late. I was 28 years old when I went in the Army. I was a 28-year-old private.
Oh,
Wow.
God.
The towers went down, and
I was going to ask what
prompted
prompted
it.
that.
yeah, and I enlisted shortly after. So I would still be doing it if I could run.
Well, we thank you
If
for
I
your
c-
service
Thank you.
to the country, so
Thank
thank
you.
you. And I guess with all of that service and then getting your master's, what path have you taken since, obviously there's a marriage there between your military service and the work that you're doing. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I worked in corrections for a few years, Middleton Jail. Super supportive, it was a great job. It just, it wasn't for me.
Right.
But I did that for a while. I got my CDL, because in the Army we ran, in 2006, we ran a lot of heavy equipment.
And what is a CDL for? Because there are a lot of acronyms
Sorry,
just for the audience.
yes,
they may
there
not
are. I'm
know.
sorry. I apologize.
That's okay. That's okay. I live in the
Yeah,
world of acronyms
commercial-
myself. So.
Commercial driver's license.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I thought at one point that's what I was going to do.
Okay.
As I said, I worked in the jail for a while.
Right.
But when I went back to school, that was my main job for about 5 years. When I left the jail, I went back to school. I was also doing an internship, but I wanted to stay in the veteran community. I wanted to stay in the workforce. So at that point, I applied at Northeast Veterans Outreach, and I worked there. And they had transitional housing for veterans. So Northeast Veterans Outreach has about 26 transitional beds
Okay.
at that time. So I worked there 2 nights a week just to kind of stay in the workforce. And graduated, and yeah, and when this job came up, I mean, I went back to school to be a VSO. This is what I went
This
back
is
to
your
school.
dream
This is
job.
your- yeah.
This is what I want to do.
That's
In essence, being a non-commissioned officer in the Army, I mean, you're looking after soldiers, you're looking after troops, and this is kind of a way for me to keep doing that.
That's great.
So-
Now, when you left the armed services, what did you leave as? What was your rank title?
Staff sergeant.
Staff sergeant.
Yeah, staff sergeant. I did make the E7 promotion list, but I at that point, I got out.
And E7 is?
Sergeant first class.
Okay.
Nice.
And it's interesting because my son's active duty, so at one point in time, we were both service members. So,
Yeah, you had mentioned to me when we had talked, you were able to get orders so that you can don your uniform and pin your son.
so he was on orders.
Right.
I traveled down to see him, but at the time, I was still a reservist. So I wore my dress blues to his graduation, and
Oh, that's
we have a
nice.
picture of us both in our dress blues in San Antonio, Texas.
Oh, that's a
which
nice
is,
moment.
That's probably a
That's
moment
great.
you'll treasure forever.
Yeah, it's super cool.
So, all right, so you were with the military, you served active duty. It doesn't matter, you reserves or not, you saw active duty.
Yeah, I tell all my veterans all the time, like because a lot of times what we're trying to do is destigmatize certain time periods. So veterans of different eras, you have, guys that served in World War II in Korea, a lot of times you'll hear, well, I didn't really serve, I was in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Right.
When my buddy was, boots on ground, Vietnam or
Right,
something.
right.
And, we have to tell folks all the time that, you took an oath
Yep.
and
Yep.
you are a veteran, and this is what you're entitled to.
Absolutely.
And it's different, different periods of war. As I had said, the Korean and World War II guys, a lot of times, they don't want to be enrolled in VA. Folks will come in because they want to get hearing aids, right? Or the service member or the veteran maybe took a fall, and the family members are coming in trying to get assistance.
Why do you think that is? That and is it different? You're saying like the generations may be a little bit different with World War II and Korea. Why is it? There's a pride there that they don't want to take the the help, or
Yeah,
is there
you're
another
talking
reason?
folks that grew up, after the
Depression.
The Depression.
Yeah.
Vietnam, different era. A lot of guys were drafted, came
Yeah.
home, uniforms went in the closet.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we've always talked about how we
Right.
did not treat our veterans well from the Vietnam era.
Yeah.
Like now we have what they call the GWAT veterans, so Global War on Terrorism, which has been expanded to Desert Storm. And
So that's going back to the early 90s at that point.
correct,
Right.
correct.
So 30 years.
Yep. So, and a lot of those veterans know what they're entitled to. Now the Department of Defense is good about briefing veterans before they get out of active duty.
Good.
And fortunately, there's one of us in every town and city in Massachusetts.
Well,
That's
actually, not in every single city and town. You were talking about how they're actually districts. And
Yes.
you're from you do VSO work for both North Andover and Boxford.
Correct.
So why don't you explain a little bit more about that?
Sure. So Mass General Law, Chapter 115 is what guides us. And based on that law, if there's over 12,000 residents in that town, then there has to be a full-time veteran service officer. So North Andover, obviously, has over 12,000 residents. Boxford has just under 12,000. So those two towns, because they are touched, they can basically become a district. They have a memorandum of understanding between the two towns. I have a full-time, soon-to-be full-time admin, because both towns have supported that. And, you know, so we will have essentially 2 full-time veterans work in the office. My admin's an Army veteran as well.
Well, that's fantastic, because it's probably better when people can connect as opposed to just saying, oh, they're just paper pushers.
Well, and that also then begs the question of what specifically do you do to support and work with the population?
And just to touch on that, so you have to be a veteran to be a
to do
VSO
that,
in
which makes
Massachusetts.
sense,
Yeah.
obviously.
But what about to be the assistant?
Well, the admin can be a civilian, but we're fortunate enough to have 2 veterans
That's
in the
great.
office.
That's
Yep.
great. And with that, what do the responsibilities entail? Give us a little bit of a background.
So, I mean, I tell folks all the time that our job essentially is to help veterans and their dependents navigate state, federal, municipal, and nonprofits. So we're guided by Department of Veterans Services, Massachusetts, but we often are making referrals within the VA. And there's 3 parts to the VA, right? So we have to tell folks this a lot. We have to explain this to veterans themselves. They don't understand. So a lot of times you know, people say, oh, the VA this, the VA that. So there's the Veterans Cemetery Administration, which is awesome. There's the Veterans Healthcare Administration,
Okay.
which we do a lot of enrollments all the time and a lot of referrals within. And then there's the Veterans Benefits Administration. And those are the folks that we're doing claims, the home loan guarantees. So we have to get the certificates of eligibility so folks can do their home loans, which is a huge benefit. GI Bill, which I used. So in claims, we do a lot of claims, which can be time-consuming and cumbersome.
And you're not the VA.
Correct. I am
and you're
not the VA.
And you're not the DOD.
Correct.
You are guided by the Commonwealth,
Correct.
but you are North Andover and Boxford.
Yes, I'm a municipal employee.
Right, and I wanted to make sure so that people don't go in and go, oh, he's DOD, or oh, he's VA.
Oh, I've had folks,
yeah.
you sent me this letter, I'm like, whoa, I didn't send you anything.
Right.
Let me see what you got, we'll read it, take a look at it, and let's see
So
how
I
we
think
can help you.
that's interesting because people, I mean, I didn't even know these pieces, and you say that many veterans don't even know the breakdown. So for the general public, I think this is really important to understand that there's a lot of, I don't want to say bureaucracy, but a lot of different layers to this that people need to understand.
Sure, and I mean, we're working within the community at multiple levels. I mean, you know, advocating for veterans at the macro level. You know, we've been fortunate enough, I mean, North Andover and Boxford are super supportive of anything we do.
That's great.
Good.
We have a ton of support within town, within all the departments within town, the PDs, fire, DPW, town manager, I mean, community services
That's
division. So we've gotten at least 4 laws adopted at the local level from the state. We have another one going to town meeting. We have a warrant article for this town meeting coming up
Why
in
don't you
both
tell us
towns.
Yeah,
a
I
little
was gonna
bit
say.
more about that.
Yeah, in both towns. So Clause 56 would be an abatement, a full abatement for National Guard and reservists who are deployed in a downrange,
What
we would say.
does that mean?
in the combat zone. So if they were activated for time of war, they would get the full tax abatement from the town.
Oh, okay.
And then last town meeting, we adopted Chapter 60, which gives us, essentially it's a checkbox in your excise tax or your homeowners, and basically you check a box and you can donate $1 and up to the Veterans Discretionary Fund. So we're really, you know, so we're doing a lot of referrals within the VA and we're doing a lot of the state stuff, but it's very income asset based.
Right.
This gives us our own fund where we can help veterans at our discretion.
Oh, that's
Right.
fantastic.
So we got that passed in North Andover
That's
last
great.
town meeting. And in Boxford, that's going in this next town meeting, hopefully.
Right.
We're still working through that, but
I can't imagine any town would say no to something like that.
Yeah.
and as a VSO, I mean, you're an advocate, and
Right.
you should be looking to
Advocate.
Yeah, advocate at the macro
and support
level
the
as
population.
well as the micro level, working with veterans and their families.
And speaking of that, you know, what is it like with your job when you're dealing sort of the spectrum of people, and what are some of the issues that you
I was going to say, what do you deal with on a
Yeah.
day-to-day basis?
Wow. So we could be working with a funeral home one day. We could be working with, oftentimes family members will call because the veteran has taken a fall, or the veteran's looking to get enrolled in VA health care, or it can be that. We have widows. We've done, widows' pensions through the VA. There's a pension if the veteran passes due to a service-connected disability,
Right.
Okay.
or they're service-connected 100% to 10 years, then the surviving spouse will receive a pension. So we have a lot of heavy conversations with folks.
What does it mean to be service-connected? Because my
Good
definition
question.
might be a little different than your definition.
Right.
So a disability incurred in service. So that can be a presumptive illness, as we see with a lot of the herbicide exposure in Vietnam. There were 14 different diagnoses that are associated with herbicide exposure or Agent Orange.
Yeah.
There have been 3 more added. There's now burn pit legislation that's gone forward, so that's in the works now. There are 3, they call them presumptive illnesses. So when it comes to service-connected disabilities, there's a time in service, the disability diagnosis, and then the nexus. How do we connect the two? And the longer you're out, the harder that can be to do.
Right, that makes sense.
So, I mean, if you're a veteran who served in Vietnam, boots on ground, and you have Parkinson's disease,
It's probably easier to show that the connection with Agent Orange.
correct.
Right. Was
But, some other claims, not so much. If you were a veteran who served in, you were on orders in Tokyo or the Philippines, it might be harder to prove that you flew into Vietnam. Because
Right.
you got to remember, this is pre-email, pre-fax. Folks got paid cash. Orders were handed off.
in
So
Right,
hand.
how do you prove
Yeah.
that?
a lot of times.
Everything was still on the old teletype machines,
Yes.
with the,
So you have a
Morse
veteran who,
code.
and this has happened several
Sure.
times in our office, where the veteran was voluntold, hey, get on that plane and get this to so-and-so, and they were
Right.
in Saigon for 3 or 4 days, or they were on a base for a few months and had to pull guard duty, were walking around in, in places where herbicide was used,
Right.
for lack of a better term, and they were exposed, but we don't always have evidence.
Right.
Flight records, pay records, things like that. So it can get tedious, and it was a long time before these veterans were recognized.
yes.
Right, of course.
So
Which goes
Yes.
back to how we've said
Right,
how
how they were treated.
Vietnam era
Correct.
veterans.
So it's like we're kind of
Still going full
backtracking
circle.
to, yeah,
circle.
and how many
try to
veterans have
address
passed?
since then.
Yes.
Since then.
Absolutely.
Now, that goes to physical
Mm-hmm.
concerns. We always hear stories about folks coming home, PTSD and other, cognitive and medical mental concerns. Can you connect that for people? Because, more likely than not, you've got somebody coming home with PTSD, not because
Sure.
they saw a puppy dog.
All the time. Tough
Right.
conversations to have. Oftentimes, we're making referrals, and this just happened last week. We had a veteran crisis, and we got him enrolled in VA healthcare that day. So we have connections at Bedford VA, which is the big hub for our area. Got him enrolled and did a warm handoff with vet centers, which are separate. The vet centers are separate from the VA.
Okay.
The
Can
records are
you-
separate.
Okay, yeah, can you explain that a little bit?
I can't, the dynamic, I couldn't explain
best of your
completely, but
ability.
Yeah.
essentially a veteran, particularly first responders, right? Because a lot of times they don't want to have their stuff out there. But they can work with the vet centers, which are trained staff. So they
Okay.
work only with combat veterans.
Okay.
Got it.
So if we have a veteran crisis, they can come in and obviously talk to us, but
Right.
these are folks that they can see regularly. and there's no costs associated with that. So we had that veteran in that office the next day. Whereas
great.
the VA is gonna, I mean, you can go there obviously, but medication prescriptions, things like that.
Right, right.
But, you know, to get some serious talk time, as I would say, you know, the vet centers are very, very helpful.
But that's available to
Right.
people.
Correct.
Yeah, not everybody may know that, so I think that's a really
Yes.
important piece of
That's an
information.
extremely important piece.
Sure,
because
I mean, they do a ton of work in our community. They're located in Lowell, but they have a, you know, within Merrimack Valley. I mean, they're, you know, seeing folks from Lowell all the way up to probably Newburyport, Salisbury, that area there.
That's amazing.
Mm.
Tell me, because this was on my list, I'm very curious, because I know Phyllis had spoken to you earlier. What is the battalion truck master? What is involved in that?
That's a cool
It
name.
I know, it sounds really kind of cool. And
That was probably
fun, I think.
the coolest name I had in the Army. So, it was,
So that was your nickname?
No, so that was an appointment from the commander.
Oh, neat.
So essentially, there were 3 of us as non-commissioned officers who
Okay.
attended a course, 2-week course, to learn how to drive MRAPs, which are the mine-resistant personnel carriers in the Army. So in 2006, we were driving flat-bottomed Humvees that were overloaded, up-armored, had, you know, they added fire suppression systems. I mean, the
Yeah.
Humvee was a replacement for the Jeep
Right.
from the 80s,
Right.
if you think about it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So fast forward 4 years later, now we're driving MRAPs. So they're V-hulled vehicles that have floating floors, fire suppression systems, you know, all sorts of gear. You can carry up to a half a squad, so 6 soldiers fit in the back very comfortably.
This
Air
isn't your
conditioning.
grandfather's Jeep.
No,
I was thinking this might be good to drive through
But,
Boston.
but with that, you have to train soldiers to drive
Yeah.
them. So
Yeah.
essentially, I ran a course for the 10 months we were
Oh,
in
that's-
Kandahar. So soldiers would come in, and I would take them out on a course and teach them to drive the MRAPs. You know, we would do a breakdown of everything in the vehicle, walk through the vehicle. We would do a driving course, and then we would do night driving. And then they would go back out to their respective units, licensed.
And ready to go.
Yeah, so driving school for soldiers, which was really cool.
No, that
Probably
is
one of the
cool.
coolest things I got to do.
That is cool.
And you were with the Corps of Engineers.
Correct.
That's one of the toughest jobs to be in. I know my father, when he was waiting for his orders to go over to Vietnam, he was with the Army Corps of Engineers. He never ended up going because that's when Nixon cut the contracts and they stopped sending, you know, troops over there. But he told me about, you know, years ago what
Yeah,
it was
I mean-
like, the training for that.
Yeah, nothing moves without the, I mean, we're doing logistics, we're doing convoys, we're building, they call it horizontal and vertical, and then there are combat engineers. So the horizontal guys, which is what I was, are running heavy equipment. So all that stuff you see on the side of the road up in 495, we ran all that equipment, bulldozers, graders, scrapers, all that heavy junk, as they
Yeah,
call
right.
it. Then you have the vertical guys that were usually, on our mission in Iraq, it was the Seabees, so they would do the horizontal stuff. So they were coming in
Right.
doing construction. So the, like plywood and, you know, stuff like that. Framing, the electrical stuff,
There's
yeah. and
so
then-
much.
Yeah, yeah.
I
it's
mean,
a
I
lot.
think this is interesting because it's so many things that civilians, people who have not been in the military, who sort of see whatever they see on TV or,
Yeah.
you know,
It-
third party, have no idea the intricacies of what goes into
And
serving.
then I have to mention the combat engineers, because
Yeah.
those are the guys
Yes.
clearing the roads.
Yeah,
So convoys move behind combat engineers. So the guys that are coming in behind you are,
They're
you know,
the cleanup
banking on the
crew.
fact that you've cleared that road.
yeah.
So in Iraq, we had 2 combat engineer companies to our
Wow.
left and right, and they were clearing the roads all through the Sunni Triangle. This was
And-
Fallujah, Ramadi, Baghdad.
And again, going back to, there's a lot of acronyms that you're talking about, okay, which,
I don't like acronyms, but if you catch me
But-
saying one, just
Well,
correct me.
well,
Just call me out.
no,
It's okay.
I understand a lot of it because, as you know, I interned for the Coast Guard, you know, during parts of Desert Shield and Desert Storm, pushing paper, so I understand a lot of it myself. But just for people who don't understand, can you explain the difference between an officer, an NCO, and an enlisted person.
Sure. So there are essentially 3 rank structures in the Army. So you have the officer corps, you have the enlisted corps, and you have the warrant officers, right? So enlisted men or women are folks who are lower ranking usually, but they go from E1 to E9. So private to command sergeant major, right? And then you have the officer corps, which are usually, traditionally were college educated, right?
Yep.
Although a lot of NCOs have their master's degrees. And they are usually in command of anywhere from a platoon size element to a company size element to a brigade, to a battalion, to a brigade. So that usually you have a lieutenant, which is like an O2, would be in charge of a company size element, which can be anywhere from 30 to 60 men.
That's
or
where our
women,
ring and
depending
knockers
on-
come in, right?
Those are West Pointers, so that's prestigious
Yes.
Right.
school that a lot of officers have graduated, very famous officers, and gone on command and done a lot of things. And today is actually, not to digress, but today is the 19th anniversary of the Iraq War.
Wow.
Yep, 19 March. So
Interesting. And I think that brings up another question we were discussing before we started to tape the show, because of making sure that people understand the difference between things, and it's kind of reinforcing the difference between Memorial Day and Veterans Day, because I think it's all sort of kind of culminated in people's minds about what that is, and so to really explain what the difference is between the two.
I'll just wait till they finish.
Yes.
Yeah, so fortunately we have a little construction going on in the background. We apologize.
Sure. So Memorial Day is a solemn holiday where we remember the service members who were passed, killed in action. It came from Decoration Day, which started after the American Civil War.
Is that when they would go out and decorate the graves of?
And during the you remember the Civil War, more Americans were killed than any war in America before and after combined.
Yeah.
700,000 Americans died. So that was Decoration Day, which also kicked off the VA, started after. But, so that's a solemn holiday where we pay tribute and honor those who are passed. Veterans Day is a celebration of those who are still with us.
Right.
So they're very two distinct, different holidays.
We don't say Happy Memorial Day.
No.
No.
You
we
can
do
say
not.
Happy Veterans Day, I would
Happy
imagine,
Veterans Day,
or respectful.
or take time to remember Memorial Day.
Sure, sure. And, around the beginning of May, end of April, we're out into the cemeteries with volunteers. We're cleaning veterans' graves. We have a lot of support in the community. A lot of volunteers that come out and do that.
That's great.
We swap out the flags, the flag holders if they're not serviceable anymore, that sort of thing. So we're pretty busy. And folks, traditionally, I think people think that's what probably the only thing we do is Veterans Day, Memorial Day, which is less than 1% of what a VSO does.
Right, right. And I think you've just explained all of, to a great extent of what you do actually, or what you're responsible for, which, kind of helps people to put it in perspective.
Correct.
And you've probably got a couple of other hard things to do in terms of talking to the widows and
The Gold Star
and
wives.
making those assistance with those end-of-life decisions. And
Correct. So there's not like one stack of things that every veteran is eligible for, right? If it was, it would be easier. It's always about where the veteran served, how the veteran served, are they a wartime veteran? Everything is based on the veteran's service. So wartime veterans are held in high regard.
because of where they were.
Sure. So a lot of times we're doing veterans pensions, widows pensions, aid and attendance packages, which is support for if the veteran or the surviving spouse is in a facility of some type. There is assistance for them, but it's a very cumbersome application process. But a lot of times we're working with widows on that and doing referrals to Congress to try to grease the wheels of production and get that pension moving. Because the VA is not there. It can just be. Be a lot.
Well,
Right.
And you had told me you work a lot. There's a veterans officer or a veterans contact over at Congressman Moulton's office?
Yes, so all members of Congress have a veterans liaison. So if we need help with something, a lot of times we're reaching out to them to try to find out, the status of. We have national service officers at the JFK building who work for the Department of Veterans Services, Massachusetts, full-time. They're great. So our claims essentially go through them and then to the VA. And I have to, before I forget, I have to remind folks that there's no cost for filing a claim with the VA. You should never have to pay.
Right.
That's
Thank you for sharing
important to
that.
know. That's
Thank you.
important to know. And I was just going to say, and for those people who don't know, the JFK building is in Boston.
Yes, the federal building. The federal building.
The federal
in Boston.
building
The
in Boston.
one of two. We've also got the Tip O'Neill building
do.
right by North Station.
Correct.
Well, Joe, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
For being here today and speaking about this. It's such an important topic, and I feel like I've been more educated about this. I mean, my stepdad was a Navy guy, and he was very proud, but we didn't really get into too much detail about services and help. And so I think this has been very informative for our audience and family members as well. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for helping me to educate folks on what we do.
Absolutely.
And we could probably go on for hours about
Yes.
this because of all the different things that you do and all the little pieces you've got to put together. But people need to be aware of the fact that you look at the individual, not as everything culminating together as everybody together, but you look at that one individual and figure out what pegs need to be put in place to offer them the services that they need.
Yes, we do.
And that's important also for people
Absolutely.
to know.
Very well put.
Yep.
And on behalf of the North Andover Commission on Ability Assistance, thank you again, Joe. North Andover and Boxford's District Director of Veteran Services, we appreciate you joining us on Ability Assistance. You can reach Joe directly by phone at 978-688-9525 or email at jleblanc@northandoverma.gov. In April, our guest will be Perkins Career Launch Program. And in May, we will be celebrating our graduating seniors who are our crew. And our guest will be For Pause for Ability. They're going to be another remote.
Wait that.
I
for that.
know they're going to be another remote
Yep.
guest. We're taking advantage of the fact we can bring guests in from other parts of the country and bring them in remotely. And to finish off our 2021 season, this is fantastic. We'll be celebrating over 25 episodes that we have given you on this show that hopefully has provided you with more services. And our guest in June will be Dawn Warren, our new town clerk. I guess
What
she's
a way
not
to end the season, I think.
We actually started the show with our then town
That's
clerk.
right, with the voting machines.
Exactly. We're consistently looking for new topics to explore here at Ability Assistance. And if there are any specific topics that you'd like to learn more about, please email me directly at pjones@northandoverma.gov.
We would like to thank all of our volunteer crew from the Greater Lawrence Technical School and Curry College. From the Greater Lawrence Technical School, Cassie Buono and John Coffere, and from Curry College, our own Carly Jones. Thank you so much.
And in addition to watching through your cable station, you can always catch all of our episodes on demand. YouTube, the Cablecast app through Roku and Apple TV. You got the North Andover CAM website, and you've got our podcast through Podbean.
We're everywhere.
Exactly. Until next month.